It's just before dawn at Austin-Bergstrom Airport, February 4, 2023. A dense fog has swallowed the runway. Visibility is down to a quarter mile. On board Southwest Flight 708, 128 people are accelerating for takeoff, unable to see anything outside their windows. What they don't know is that a FedEx cargo jet is descending through that same fog, landing gear down, aimed at the exact same strip of asphalt. They are seconds from colliding, and only 2 people on the entire airfield are about to see it happening. The story of Southwest Flight 708 and FedEx Flight 143-2 is more than just a close call. It is an analytical look at how a single incorrect assumption, compounded by a critical technology gap, can bring 2 airliners within 170 feet of each other. This is the story of an incident that was invisible to almost everyone involved until it was already over. It is a minute-by-minute breakdown of how the layers of aviation safety were peeled back, one by one, leaving the lives of 131 people dependent on the vigilance of a single flight crew, and it serves as a warning about the hidden vulnerabilities within one of the world's safest transportation systems. The morning of February 4, 2023, presented challenging conditions for aviation in Austin, Texas. With visibility at a quarter mile and a cloud ceiling of 200 feet, the airport was operating under what is known as low instrument flight rules. In these conditions, pilots and controllers are almost completely dependent on their instruments and established procedures. In the air traffic control tower, the controller responsible for runway 18 LEL could not physically see the airplanes on the ground. The tower itself was shrouded in the same thick fog. Critically, Austin-Bergstrom International Airport was not equipped with airport surface detection equipment, or ASDX. This is a ground radar system that allows controllers to see the precise location of aircraft on runways and taxiways, even in zero visibility. Without it, the controller was relying on radio calls and a mental picture of where he believed the planes to be. On the ground, the crew of Southwest Flight 708, a Boeing 737, taxied towards runway 18L. They were carrying 123 passengers and 5 crew members. At 6:38 a.m., they reported to the controller that they were holding short of the runway, ready for takeoff. Meanwhile, approaching from the north was FedEx Flight 1432, a much larger Boeing 767 cargo plane arriving from Memphis. On board were 3 crew members. Around 6:34 a.m., the FedEx crew contacted the Austin controller, reporting they were established on the Instrument Landing System, or ILS, for runway 118L. The controller cleared them to land. The controller's plan was a standard one: allow the departing Southwest jet to take off before the arriving FedEx jet touched down. FAA procedure requires at least 2 miles of separation between a departing and an arriving aircraft on the same runway. The controller believed he had the spacing to make this work. It was an assumption that would soon prove to be incorrect. The first link in the chain of events was an incorrect assumption. When Southwest 708 called ready for takeoff, the controller, unable to see them, assumed they were at the runway's edge. He issued the clearance, Southwest 708, runway 118 LEL, cleared for takeoff. However, the aircraft was still about 550 feet from the runway and took nearly a minute to taxi into position. The second link was an unforeseen delay. Due to freezing temperatures, the Southwest crew performed a standard engine run-up after lining up on the runway. They advanced the power, checked the engines, and only then released the brakes to begin their takeoff roll. This safety procedure added another 19 seconds where the plane was stationary. In total, from the moment of the takeoff clearance, over a minute and a half passed before Southwest 708 began its takeoff roll. All the while, the FedEx 767 was descending through the fog, closing the distance to the runway at over 150 miles per hour. As the Southwest jet remained stationary, the 2-mile safety buffer required by the FAA disappeared. Aboard the FedEx flight, the pilots were also flying blind, relying on their instruments for a Category N ILS approach. But a sense of unease was developing. Having heard the takeoff clearance given to Southwest, the FedEx captain grew concerned. At 6:39 a.m., he keyed the mic to ask for confirmation. The controller responded, FedEx 1432. You are cleared to land. Traffic departing prior to your arrival. This confirmation, based on the controller's faulty mental picture, momentarily reassured the crew. By this point, the FedEx plane had descended into the fog, making him even more blind to the impending conflict. The final link in the chain was the Southwest crew's response. At 6:40 a.m., with the FedEx 767 just 0.7 miles from the runway, the controller, perhaps sensing the timing was tight, asked the Southwest flight, "Confirm you are on the roll." The Southwest captain replied, "Rolling now," but at that moment, the 737 was just beginning its acceleration. On the flight deck of the FedEx 767, the situation had become critical. The first officer, peering into the dense fog, saw it first. A single, faint position light from the Southwest jet, followed by the dark silhouette of the 737's tail, sitting directly on their runway. It was a solid shape where there was supposed to be empty space. The FedEx plane was just crossing the runway threshold at approximately 150 feet above the ground. The Southwest 737 was now accelerating towards them, about 1,000 feet down the runway. There was no time for radio calls. The first officer yelled, "Go around!" The FedEx captain reacted instantly, applying full power and pulling back on the yoke to command the cargo jet into a climb. The aircraft's engines roared as it clawed for altitude. At their closest point, the belly of the FedEx 767 cleared the tail of the Southwest 737 by only 150 to 170 feet, a distance less than the length of the FedEx plane itself. The 128 people aboard Southwest Flight 708 were completely oblivious, feeling only the normal rumble of acceleration as their plane lifted off. They continued to their destination in Cancun, most of them never knowing they had been part of a near catastrophe. The FedEx crew circled and landed safely 12 minutes later. The crisis was over. The investigation was just beginning. The events in Austin raise an important question. What systemic issues allow for such a close call to occur? The investigation that followed would reveal that this was not simply one person's mistake, but a failure of the system itself. The National Transportation Safety Board, or NTSB, launched a full investigation. What they uncovered was not a single, isolated mistake, but a systemic failure. The probable cause, they determined, was the controller's incorrect assumption that the Southwest plane would depart before the FedEx plane arrived. This was fueled by what investigators called expectation bias. The controller stated he believed the Southwest plane would take off quickly, as is common. However, this was combined with a lack of situational awareness regarding the plane's actual position and a lack of specific training for low-visibility operations at the Austin Tower. But the NTSB's findings went deeper. The single most critical contributing factor was the absence of surface detection technology, like ASDX, at Austin's airport. NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy stated that had this technology been in place, it would have provided visual and oral alerts, highlighting the insufficient separation and preventing the conflict. The controller would have seen the two icons converging on his screen and known his mental picture was wrong. The investigation also highlighted that the cockpit voice recorders on both planes were overwritten. FAA regulations at the time required only a 2-hour recording loop, and since both planes continued to operate, the audio from the incident was erased. The NTSB had recommended expanding this to 25 hours back in 2018, but the FAA had not yet implemented the change. Finally, the NTSB noted that the Southwest crew contributed by not informing the controller that they needed extra time on the runway for their engine run-up. As NTSB board member Michael Graham stated, "We had two aircraft within 200 feet of each other, and that should not happen." This was a failure of aviation safety. In the aftermath, the NTSB issued 7 new safety recommendations, reiterating the urgent need for surface detection equipment at all major airports and for cockpit alerting systems that warn pilots directly of runway traffic. In response, the FAA announced that Austin would be among the first airports to receive a new system called the Surface Awareness Initiative, with installation expected in 2024. The incident in Austin was not an anomaly. It was part of a surge in serious runway incursions across the United States in 2023, which prompted the FAA to hold a safety summit to address the cracks appearing in the system. These events are often the result of a chain of errors, where human factors, technology gaps, and weather combine to defeat the existing layers of safety. The Austin near miss serves as a powerful lesson. It proves that safety is not a static achievement, but a dynamic process of vigilance, communication, and constant technological improvement. The professionalism of the FedEx flight crew averted a tragedy with 131 lives at stake. Their actions turned a potential disaster into a critical, life-saving warning, a warning that forced the industry to confront its hidden vulnerabilities before another incident like it becomes a real one.